Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is a Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, July 20th. First item that's marked for discussion on our agenda is item number 1 under presentations. Presentation regarding Indian Creek Watershed Management Authority. Is that correct?
I don't believe Jennifer's here yet, so I don't know if we want to go to the next presentation first.
And she will be here in person?
She should be, yes.
Yeah, okay. So we will move forward to number 2 while we wait for our presenter to arrive. Number 2 is a presentation regarding the COVID-19 Community Recovery Task Force. This is a report on the task force and the accomplishments and where we go from here. We have our communications manager, Amber Kissinger.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. I just wanted to provide a brief update as the work of the group kind of winds down, but they do stand ready to respond should we need to come together again. But just wanted to provide a high-level overview of the work of the group and some of the accomplishments over the past year. Marion played an active role in our regional response, but also kind of took it a step further and created the COVID-19 Community Recovery Task Force. And this was probably within a month of kind of the initial closures and orders that were given. Really, the main goal was, at the mayor's direction, to engage our community partners in a coordinated and holistic approach to supporting individuals, families, and businesses in the recovery process. Several sectors were represented on the committee, and I'll name them off here quickly. The steering committee consisted of Mayor Nick, the city manager, Lon Plucon, Steve Jensen, who was Mayor Pro Tem at the time, Chamber President Jill Ackerman, Medco President Nick Glue, and Medco Executive Committee member Lee Eilers, and I assisted in kind of coordinating the meetings of the group. The community sectors that were represented included local government, the individuals mentioned, and also Brent Olson with Lynn County. The business and economy sectors included Brian Crow, who at the time was with the Economic Alliance, Brooke Proddy with Uptown Marion, Nick Glue with Medco, and Jill Ackerman with the Chamber. Education, both superintendents worked together, but Shannon Bisgard sat on the committee with Linmar. The health sector, Dr. Jacqueline Price served, as well as Amber Hoff. Human Services, Elizabeth Swick was part of the group, and then Pastor Mike Morgan represented the faith communities. And so we met weekly, then monthly, and have been going for about a year up until recently. The group came together, shared ideas, and several different initiatives were taken on. Initially, early on, we identified that a central hub of information was important, kind of that one place for folks to look for Lynn County metrics, city service implications, and that would be continually updated. We drafted and updated a reopening and recovery toolkit for the business community, conducted resident readiness surveys through an online tool. We did that twice just to kind of get a baseline for where consumer sentiment was at the time. We assembled a mental health resource document to connect folks with mental health providers that were accepting new patients, able to assist those in times of crisis. You as council members were involved in making 1,000 business contacts in the early days with phone calls in partnership with Medco and the Chamber. The Chamber jumped up right away and created a delivery, carry out, and curbside Facebook page that has over 4,500 members and is still active today. I'm really encouraging folks to support local businesses, find ways to use carry out services and other means to support those businesses at a time when they couldn't have their doors open. Posters were created. The chamber was instrumental in coordinating the community cash program, where financial institutions supported the effort, and we were able to infuse dollars back into that retail and service community in the form of $25 gift certificates. And then the idea being that people would match that. And at the end of the day, over $20,000 was redeemed throughout that promotion. We did things as simple as promoting volunteer opportunities and doing a juice box drive for the FLY program. The U.S. Conference of Mayors reached out to Mayor Nick, and he was able to secure 5,000 face masks that the schools could then use once we returned to class. We designated a special service area on 11th Street once we had determined that people were more comfortable dining outdoors, and just look for those opportunities to make things easier on the business community. Public service announcements were a big part of what we had done. And over the course of the last year, we produced 10 of them, and found the local media to be very receptive and very willing to partner and air those spots at no cost to us, to share those messages of wearing masks and finding healthy behaviors to come through the pandemic. Press conferences were a big part of the response, and then still finding ways to do those community events, bring people together in a safe way. Things like changes to farmers markets, traveling concerts, and even Santa and Mrs. Claus on parade. So that's a real high level overview of kind of what we had done, but just wanted to provide council with that update.
Thank you. That was a really good summary. Does anyone have questions for Amber? And I see that Chamber President Jill Ackerman's here too, if anyone has questions for any for her on anything. Any questions? Comments? Well, as Amber mentioned, that we met for the first time 2 weeks ago, or a week ago now, probably a week ago or so, week and a half ago, in person. It was all over Zoom that entire year, and thanked everyone who participated. And we're not disbanding the task force. We're just keeping it on hold if we need to get back together. We were meeting weekly, then we met bi-weekly, and then monthly. And I think we decided that we're at a position now where we can not have to meet regularly, but only as we need to going forward. And let's hope that we don't ever have to meet again. But in case we do, I thought this was a really great response to the pandemic. That was a community-wide response that it had input from throughout the community in various sectors, so that we can all keep tabs on what's going on, we inform each other, and we were able to respond in a very unified and comprehensive way. I think that really benefited the community, and appreciate everyone's work, especially Amber, who did a lot of the organizing of the meetings and the messaging that went out, and the public service announcements. The chamber obviously and Metco played a big role with everything that they did. Just appreciate everyone's participation and collaboration on it. Again, it showed how Marion does things in a different way that really sets the example. So any questions for Amber or comments? Okay, thanks so much, Amber.
Thank you.
All right, moving on with the agenda. No other items on page 1 are marked for discussion by staff. Oh, yes, we have to go back to the presentation that we were waiting for. Okay, is Jennifer with us now?
I am
Well, hello.
here. Yes, I apologize. There was a little more construction than I
Yeah, well,
remembered.
Perfectly understandable. Thank you for getting
And
here.
I was trying to drive safely
Yes.
with love, not anger. Hi, I'm Jennifer Fensel with East Central Iowa Council of Governments, and I see some new faces, so I appreciate your time. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the Indian Creek Watershed Management Authority. You all have been a partner in that effort since 2012, and it is a a cooperative effort among the cities in the Indian Creek watershed. We can go to the next slide. There's a little sort of artful map. So you can get your bearings where the watershed is. Marion is entirely within the Indian Creek watershed, but it is a cooperative effort between the county, the Soil and Water Conservation District, and the communities in the watershed. It's all about urban-rural partnerships, and the idea is to leverage resources to try and get improvements in the watershed for both water quality and water quantity. And Marion contributes $17,333 a year, which we appreciate. Next slide, please. And so some of the current projects, the big one that we've had going on is the Soil Health Partnership. And normally I've had Emery Davis join me. He's the Soil Health Coordinator. He was hired 2 years ago, and he will be on staff until the later part of 2023. It's a 5-year NRCS grant that the Indian Creek Watershed Management Authority matches to pay for the salary. And the idea is that we pay for that expertise and that experience and technical assistance to help landowners, whether it be the communities or agricultural landowners, in building soil health, which increases water absorption, improves water quality. One of the other things that we also were successful in is assisting the city of Marion to get a $40,000 grant from the Corridor MPO to do a stream access master plan. That's an initiative of your Creekside Pride group. We also reactivated the stream gauge at Thomas Park, and you'll see a little graphic of that displays your recent unfortunate flooding that you had here in your community. That is a 3-year contract, and we are paying for that again with those leveraged resources. The Cedar Rapids Source Water Protection Resource Conservation Partnership Project, that is something that it's just getting off the ground now. It's an initiative that Cedar Rapids put forward. It's an NRCS funded, national funded program, and it will provide money for technical assistance and practices moving forward. It just takes a little while for all of that to get ramped up. Iowa Big was in a partnership with your Creekview Cove neighborhood to put in some rain gardens, and unfortunately COVID wrecked that right at the last minute. But I'm hopeful that we can get that put back together again. The Lower Cedar Watershed Plan, and then this one's a little confounding to me, but the NRCS has what they call the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program. We applied to it, and they said yes, sort of. They're dedicating some money to do an assessment in Indian Creek, and that assessment hopefully will unlock some money that can be used for flood prevention programs in your communities. So that one is a asterisk to be determined, but it's still exciting that they didn't say completely no. Next slide. So I just wanted to run through some of the highlights of the soil health partnerships, and that's kind of our flagship, what we're putting all of our effort into. In terms of Emory's success with getting cover crops on the landscape, 2,900 acres of cover crops in the watershed, that's at about 12%. And for context, statewide, the adoption rate is usually between 3 and 6%. So it's more than double in our watershed, what we see typically across the state. He's managed to get 4 edge of field practices constructed, and that is without implementation money. This is, again, just money for his expertise and his effort. And I think it's paying off. He did a presentation at the Marion Homeschool Assistance Program. We did a virtual virtual field day for women landowners in the watershed in February. He teamed up with Practical Farmers of Iowa in March to do another virtual field day or a webinar. And then his work has also, with those, the construction of those edge of field practices have been featured in the Gazette and on some of our news channels. You can find a link to that story on the website for the Indian Creek Watershed Management Authority. He also hosted a field day in June. Next slide. And I have a few highlights from that, but first, the next one is going to show just a fun picture of cover crops. And then he also, Emery is pictured there on, I guess, the left. And he's managed to get a couple of signs. We got those donated through a partnership with the Iowa Ag Water Alliance. Wanted to make sure to get that right, but that's at one of the edge of field practices. Next slide. And we'll give you a little picture of the construction of a bioreactor. 2 bioreactors and 2 saturated buffers were constructed last fall. This is a picture of the trench to be filled with wood chips. Water filtrates through wood chips, and it has shown that water monitoring is showing a removal rate of between 75% and 90% of the incoming nitrates, which is pretty good. Before this project, there was only 1 saturated buffer in the whole county, and now we have 4 just in the Indian Creek watershed. We're concentrating that nutrient reduction into a smaller area, so hopefully we can see that benefit. And there are plans to install more bioreactors as well as a wetland, a denitrification wetland. Okay, just hang in there with me one more. And this is some pictures of the field day at Kurt Zingula's farm. He's been a really great partner. This was meant to kind of point out that native cover plantings, which were sort of standing in there, knee-deep greenery, helps soil health, but it also helps water quality, habitat, erosion, and yields. Building soil health. He also did a saturated buffer at his property, which is pretty cool to see. And he's very open about sharing information. And that's all I have for you. And I appreciate the last slide is just our contact information. We can make this available for you. And I encourage you to go to our website to see those news stories if you didn't get a chance. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Jennifer?
Okay, I'll go sit down and cool off.
I have one quick question for the non-farmers here. Define a cover crop.
Oh, yes, thank you. Perfect question. So a cover crop is either overseeded it can be in corn or beans, or it can be flown over. So they drop the seed while the crop is still coming to maturity in the fall. And then once they harvest, in the cool weather of the fall and the early winter, you know, like your grass really likes that weather. It's like rye, winter rye, and other species. I think radishes are one that will begin to grow. Their roots will stay alive over the winter, and then they will green up in the spring, creating a cover so that spring rains and snow melt won't take away as much of the topsoil. But the secret is keeping those living roots. And the roots then stay, it aerates the soil, little bugs and critters live down there, do their thing, everything's happy. Well, how was that?
That's a great explanation. Thank you. I'm sure that it was more than just me that was wondering what that is.
What a cover crop was? Yeah, I probably should have thought of that. But yeah, no, but that's what it is. Living roots, keeping something alive in the soil year round, aerate, activity, critters, all good.
Makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Thank you for
You're
your
welcome.
time and
Thank you.
appreciate the presentation. Okay, now moving on with the rest of the agenda. No other items are marked on page 1. And on page 2, down to public safety. So any item prior to public safety that council members would like to discuss in particular? Okay, if there are any, we can come back, but let's move on to public safety. C1 and C2 are marked.
Yes, sir. Do you want me up at the podium? I forgot how we do it when we're sitting
Well,
out here.
you're free to stay there now
Okay.
that we're all back in the
All
same
right.
room, and yeah.
Very
that's
good.
Yeah.
A couple I just wanted to bring to your attention. C1 is 2 bills we got from Gray Bill Communications. They outfitted 2 of our squad cars, but we didn't get the bill until after July 1st. We'd budgeted for it last year. So we're going to carry over 31,000 from last year's budget, and we'll make up the additional 4,000 from this year's budget. They just had some trouble getting some equipment installed, and we didn't want to pay it until it was done correctly, and they finally got it and got it to us. So that was C1. C2, we had a vehicle, one of our squad cars was totaled in May. We got a settlement check here a few weeks ago for $21,151. With all the shortage of chips, we're having trouble finding squad cars. We were told it could take up to 4 months to get till we get our hands on it, and then you're looking at probably another 2 months by the time we get our equipment installed. Sergeant Jerry Whitson found one at Stivers. It's black. It's the only one they had on the lot that was not white, and the only one that we could find. So we wanted to kind of deviate from policy and not have to do a bid for the vehicle. We did bid back in November for squad cars. The price they quoted us for this one is only $300 over what the bid was in November. The company in Waukee at Stivers Ford, they've got the state contract for Ford Explorer Interceptors. So we feel pretty comfortable we're getting a good price, and we want to go ahead and pick that up while we can, so we can get that one rolling, and then we'll go ahead and go through the bid process for the new cars this year that we're going to purchase.
Okay, is that clear to everyone? Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
So will we have it painted to match the rest, or will we have like an anomaly in the fleet?
I think what we're going to try is they've got this new striping. It's called ghost striping. It's basically, you can't see it during the day, but at night it lights up just like you'd see on a regular squad car now. We're going to try that. It's a black vehicle, so we're going to try that and see what it looks like. The next ones we order will be blue, and we'll continue with that. But like I say, we're just kind of in a hurry to get this one while we can.
Okay, other questions for the chief? Any questions on C3 or C4? All right, moving on to engineering. Again, no items are marked on page 3 for discussion or at all under the consent agenda for engineering. Any items under engineering that council members would like to discuss individually? Community development, again, no items are marked by the staff. Any of those items? Yes, go ahead, Renee.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to talk about F2 for a little bit. The Smoothie King. I don't have the backup with me, but I looked at it over the weekend, and this one really like smacked of Dunkin' Donuts to me. And I don't feel like I know the note said that planning and zoning kind of wrestled with it. It ultimately passed. I still don't feel good about it with what's coming and how numbers, like, I don't know that Prospect Meadows was taken into account. They were talking about how many cars normally queue, et cetera. So I'm just wondering what options we might have with this group before everything goes in to, I want them to do more. I mean, I think that's just a time bomb. It'll take a while to get bad, but it'll get bad. And so I would just like to avoid it because there's really nothing that can be, I mean, we have the best solution that we can do at Dunkin'. I just want to avoid doing that. So whatever you can illuminate.
Yeah, it was a conversation at P&Z. Staff actually, and we don't do this very often, but did recommend denial of the request as it was submitted. The petitioners identified what they thought would be a solution to route the traffic into their private development area opposed to the public street. The conversation from staff was that, you know, that doesn't always work. Signage is great, but it just simply doesn't always work. But the commission felt like they wanted to push and move that forward. So it does come to the council as a recommendation by P&Z. Staff, you'll see the staff report kind of outlines the concerns as we move that forward.
So Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval, but staff, did they convince staff to change their minds? Or if you were recommending to council, because I'm not for it as it is.
Yeah, I mean, our staff report is maintained, but the commission's recommendation gets brought forward. So
Okay.
that's unfortunately, the council will be put in the position of wrestling with those.
Wouldn't be our first
Yep.
time.
Correct.
And I just, I just wanted to bring that up for everyone here because of what's happened at Duncan. And you're right, people don't read signs. There were signs there for months telling people not everybody wants their coffee. Everybody's going to want their smoothie. And I think it said that, if a bank went in, maybe there would be some more stalls or, but I don't want to make any assumptions on what's coming in. And I thought that it indicated the queuing would stack on, was that 62nd or something, which is not ideal. So I guess I'm just putting it out there. And for the Smoothie King people, although I really want Smoothie King, it's nothing on them, but thinking about the residents in the area and the future business to come. And then the fact that 13 and I don't know what we call that, 7th, 1st, Marion, whatever you want to call it. Those are worse roads to queue onto than the situation we've had down here. So if it's coming to us like that, I'll be a no. So everyone should take a good look at that before that gets pushed through.
Anyone else? Okay, any other item on page 4? Okay, for the next, for the next section of the consent agenda, I'll turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, doesn't look like we have anything marked. Any questions about what we've got on the consent agenda with Mayor Abalassi's abstention? Yeah, Renee, did you have something? No? Okay. Okay, back to you.
Okay, on to the regular agenda. Under administrative services, again, nothing is marked for discussion. Any questions on those items? Okay, under engineering, the first item is E7. Prior to E7, any items anyone would like to discuss in particular? All right, E7 through E10, I will let the Mayor Pro Tem handle. Thank you.
Okay. Looks like, is it Mike?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any questions, but this is the 10th Avenue side pass, 10-foot wide trails that parallel the street from Walmart to Hy-Vee.
Any questions for Mike?
Just quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick one, Mike. Remind us of the estimated start date for this one?
So this has a late start date of 8/9 of
Okay.
21.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
In terms of how this is built out, are they just going to do one side at a time so the walkers actually can still use, the worn path, so to speak? They're not going to.
We won't know that till we have the pre-construction meeting, and we cannot contact the contractors until this contract is approved.
Okay, I'll ask next time we have a meeting.
Later.
Hold the question. Anybody else? Okay, how about E8?
E8 is a MOA with Lux Air Aviation. So for the Aircom Park sanitary sewer, because we're going to close a section of the runway, we looked at 2 different alternatives. One was the solution that you see on the screen, was actually removing the paint on the southerly portion of the runway, repainting it for 5 days, and then closing it back down, removing that paint, and then repainting it back how it was in order to get that sanitary sewer through there. So rather than marring up our new runway, we worked with both Luxair and PNN Flight and Charter so that we could just pay them for the days that it would be down for their losses rather than spend that money messing with the brand new runway. So in the contract, and that's why they're E10, so they're kind of all combined together, but with E10, then we changed the specifications. So you City council has previously approved the project calendar, but we're gonna approve it again with that new condition in there of there's 7 calendar days with $4,000 per day. If the contractor gets it done prior to 7 days, there's an incentive. If they go over the 7 days, then they get charged $4,000 per day to backfill that charge that we are then paying those two entities.
Questions? Okay. I think, does that cover E8?
Yeah,
E9,
that's
and E10?
E7, 8, 9, and 10.
That's great. Okay, community development looks like nothing marked up to F5. Anything before we get to F5? Okay, F5. All you, Tom.
So just to point out F4, just to make note that I know that the council directed staff to proceed with the to acquire the outlot on Lennon Lane, and that's number 4. I know it's not, or Penny Lane, sorry. That's on there. I'm sure you get to see that in the staff report, but we'll be moving that forward. I just wanted to make note of that. I know the council was watching that project as we went through. So there's an encroachment agreement being proposed for the backside of Hipster. And if you go out there, I think there's some tables and chairs that have already been kind of added back there, but they're looking for an encroachment agreement associated with that in the alleyway, which staff does support. This agreement just allows for that to occur on a formal basis. Any questions on that?
Any questions? Yes, Steve.
Yeah, excuse me, Tom, my question is not specifically about this, but I'm a huge fan of outdoor dining. Kind of like Ramsey's had with a couple of tables outside and all of that. So as we go forward with our redevelopment of the uptown area, again, when I talk to different restaurants and all of that, I certainly encourage them to consider doing some outdoor dining. But do we have a pretty clear outline of what is required for them to be able to do that? How far out they're going to be able to come once the street and sidewalk and all of that is redone? So if as we go through this whole process of rebuilding the uptown area, and if we encourage them to do that, at least I do, is the city ready to work with them?
So the quick answer to that is we're not in the best position. The longer answer is what we've done is we've identified and completed encroachment agreements, some like the one on the agenda tonight.
Mhm.
And then and over the years, they've kind of differed in how they've been handled. The biggest problem with the previous was we didn't have a lot of room to work with. So we had to ensure that if there was a light pole or a tree that distance would be different. Under the new guys, we'll have a pretty standardized and uniform street layout. So I think we'll have an easier time of just providing a process for that. But we do and have looked at the Cedar Rapids process, which they actually, because of COVID, they reduced the approval process by not even requiring it, I believe, to go through their city council.
Yeah.
And I think that's the model that we're looking at to proceed with. And they also have some insurance and liability processes that I think they require as part of that as well. But we're currently trying to get to that point where it's a much more clear process.
So how much wider or deeper, whatever version you want to call it, is the new sidewalk going to be compared to the current sidewalk?
I believe we're going from 11 to 21. I'm looking at Mike out of the corner of my eye. Yeah, it's about 10 foot wider.
Oh, that's a huge difference.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
it's substantial. And then if you take 5 off the 21, you're sitting at 16 feet because that 5 foot's that, what are we calling it? The streetscape area, which is like the pole, the planter, the tree and such. So, and then there's a dedicated walkway area that we've identified on the plan. So that's the ADA accessible lane. So that's going to have the appropriate grade and such. And then from building face to that point would be that area that would be able to be used or encroached upon.
Yeah, we actually call it the cafeteria area.
There you go.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon us to, again, I would certainly encourage it, but I think also to make sure the rules that we have going with that will also make sure that those areas look good after, we've spent the amount of dollars that the city's going to spend, so that that'll look good on the street side as well. Thanks.
It's a good question about process and certainly support that idea of, right, making it more efficient and while protecting the aesthetics, but making it more efficient for those folks to just get after, being able to have that as part of their offerings. So that's good. Other questions? Okay. I will pass the
Thanks.
meeting back to the mayor.
Okay, we're on F6, which is also marked for discussion.
And this to Councilman Steve Jensen's point is a more formalized illustration of what we'd like to see in a proposal. You can see they've used the existing or the new streetscape. They've identified the locations of the tables. They do have what's being considered permanent fixtures within that area. They're stone, so they look similar to their parking. So from aesthetic perspective, these do look nice. They're contributing to the building, and they look like around the corner. They're going to have the same railing system and support piers. So this is a situation where I think we want to get to as it relates. But this is an agreement with What Do You Want, which Tommaso's Pizza for their 7th Ave location of tables and chairs in front of their building.
Go ahead, Steve.
So just to follow up on the other discussion, again, so when we talk about the details going forward, are we going to get into the nuts and bolts about the types of gates, fencing, tables and chairs that can be allowed and that cannot be? In other words, we don't want to see any plastic tables and chairs. It has to be of a higher quality. So I want to make sure that we're getting down into this far enough so that whatever they put out there is going to be sustainable, look good, and not only be comfortable, but also be lasting.
Yeah, we did not get into the actual tables and chairs in this particular instance, but that's a conversation that we can have, and certainly would be a part of that encroachment as we move it forward.
That's probably a conversation you might want to involve the Uptown organization and chamber in, as they can gauge with the business owners, what's a reasonable expectation, and they can help you convey that message and sell whatever it is you decide on doing. So very good. Okay, Renee, go ahead.
Thanks. And so to that point, and maybe it's already been considered, but I'm noticing, and Iowa's a great place for it, those igloos that you can get more months out of dining outside, those clear igloo things, or I know in a lot of the big cities, they have just like the clear awnings that roll down like curtains. And so all of that should be considered and discussed so that there's some uniformity and just doesn't look like jank after all this money and time. So just
That's
thought.
a good point. Probably want to add heaters.
Yeah.
The fire chief just kicked me under the chair.
Nice.
Not a bad.
Okay, other comments or observations? Yes, go ahead.
Tom, you had hit something that I was thinking about there, and that's that insurance. When we take a look at these, if a said address is within 4 walls, how is that being looked at when customers are being served? Because technically that would be off premises as a commercial business. Are we prepared to handle either hold harmless from the city or because you've got property, a couple things here. One is you've got tables and service where that would be part of the business owners, which would become off premises. And then you also have liability, which would be completed products and operations from a commercial standpoint, because they're no longer really technically on premises, they're off premises. But are we prepared, or do we have any documentation for that?
I can answer that one. First, I think I want to point out that I read the agreement for, I believe, Tomaso's, and it addresses that issue in there, that they're responsible for getting the appropriate liquor license if they're going to serve alcohol. With regard to other service on public property, there are some provisions in the alcoholic beverages law which will allow them to extend their license to cover adjacent outdoor seating. That's kind of how Cedar Rapids has gotten around it. I don't remember exactly what that process is off the top of my head or what the language in the license is, but I can look that up and get that out in an email before Thursday. I looked at it for a long time when we were looking at doing the 11th Avenue areas, because the sidewalk is not, it's right of way, but the code actually provides that you can't have alcohol on the public highways and streets. So sidewalks are okay. And then there's some room for that in the licensing. And I don't remember if that was something that changed with COVID or if it was just one of those little wording details that we're just going with.
Okay, thank you. I was just, and one other thing too, maybe just a quick question on that is are those neighboring cities that are operating under those guidelines, are they asking for copies of certificates of insurance showing those extensions for those?
I believe we require that as part of our licensing procedures for the city of Marion.
Okay, thank you.
If we don't, I will make sure that's in our procedures now.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, other questions, comments? Will?
Is that section of sidewalk, is that gonna be new or so that will be new? So with them putting in the permanent wall, I guess, and fencing, are they doing that during the construction now? So it's gonna be all part of, okay, thank you. They're
won't tear
shaking
it up.
heads, yes.
They won't tear it up, I think is what you're asking.
Yeah, they're not gonna go back in and tear it up after a new thing. That's, yeah, thank you.
That really increases their seating capacity too. Wow. Okay, great. Other questions, comments? All right, thank you. On to other department discussions. We have an item marked, which is Public Safety Information Management System update. Who's handling that?
That'd be me
Chief?
and Zach.
Oh.
Zach's going to jump in here and show
Zach's
you
here.
some numbers here in a little bit, which I know you're all very excited about. So the records management system, we've talked about this before. We put some money in the budget this year to get that project started. It's a big investment. And so we thought it was important to kind of keep you up to speed of where we're at so far. You want to swap that? There you go. Again, some of the things that we need to upgrade on our system, the system that we currently have for records management and what our dispatchers use to send us out on calls, both police and fire, is just insufficient for agencies our size. Back when we were a 20-man department, it was fine, but with 30-something thousand calls a year, the multiple cases that we've started putting into the monthly reports, you see how many cases our investigators are starting. We don't even have a case management system. We keep documents inside folders on the current system that we have. We don't have any way of linking those together. I'm afraid that eventually it's going to come back to haunt us when we're turning stuff over for discovery, that we're going to miss something because we keep stuff in so many different files. So there's a risk factor in there for us. The visibility, again, being able to pull up data when people ask for the number of calls and stuff is still a challenge for us. We'd like to be able to make our webpage a little more transparent with better records and maybe give some search capabilities to the citizens that can get in there and kind of play around to an extent to find out the exact data that they want to see. We can't do that with what we currently have. The command staff making decisions about resource allocations and things like that, they just can't do it. It's very difficult for us to pull data out on the number of calls, the time of day that calls are coming in. This new system that we're getting, hopefully will have the capability where at the beginning of the shift, the sergeants and lieutenants can go in, they can pull up and see what happened the shift before, the night before. They can figure out that we need to put somebody in plain clothes down by Walmart because we've had a bunch of break-ins in cars, things like that, stuff that we just currently can't do. Go ahead, switch that, Rachel. So the strategic plan alignment, again, this hits on a couple. the staffing model that we're putting together, without being able to pull that data, it makes it difficult to make that determination. I also think that this is going to streamline some of the things that we do now that it takes multiple people to do. We'll be able to do it easier and maybe with one or two people. It also hits on the one of the other strategic goals of a efficient government, because we did partner with Hiawatha, the city of Hiawatha, on this. They're going to pick up a small portion of the initial cost and then a portion of the annual cost. That benefits us in a couple of ways. We're going to share our names database and things so we can see the names that they have in theirs and who they're dealing with. They can see ours. It makes it easier for the investigators. There will be some internal firewalls where they can't get into our actual investigative files without calling us first, but we'll be able to see the kind of calls that they're going on. They'll be able to see ours in real time, which is a big benefit. They're going to pick up about $40,000 of the initial cost plus about $8,000 a year in the annual fees, which doesn't cost us anything. We worked it out, and I don't want to steal Zach's thunder, but we did talk with Tyler Technologies. It doesn't cost us anymore. It wasn't going to be any cheaper if we didn't include Hiawatha, so this was just a good way of chopping off some of that cost for us. A little more work on the front end, but it's not going to cost us anything more. So it's a good way to partner up with them. Next slide. Again, the project goals, kind of streamline and automate operations, bring the department sort of up to speed. It is a big expense. I understand that it's a big ask, but there's departments that are 5 times our size that are using the same system, and it's got plenty of capacity for them. So I think it would carry us on until the end of life for the software. Tyler's a big company, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. So I think it's worth the investment to get it done now, because this stuff's only going to get more expensive as the years go on. Next slide. So what we've done so far, we did our needs assessment. Tyler came out and sat down with us. They brought a crew out. They did a demonstration for us, Hiawatha, the fire department. They showed us the capabilities of the system, asked us what we needed. We went back and we went over to Des Moines. We took a field trip over there. 6 or 7 of us went over there and spent a day over in Dallas County where they're using this on the sheriff's office. Got the really down and dirty with each entity between investigators, patrol, the command staff on the analytics piece, and the dispatchers, and nobody had anything negative to say about it. They were all very impressed with Tyler's responsiveness to it when they called for help or needed anything. Next slide. Again, some of the things that we're going to be able to do is the search capabilities and the data analytics tool. It's similar to like a Google search where you're not limited to only searching what parameters they put in there. You can actually build your own search strings within there. So if I need to find out how many left-handed bank robbers we've had in Marion in 6 years, I can do it. You know, I can't do that what we currently have now. It'll be accessible. That analytics tool will be accessible to everybody on the department. Command staff will be able to use it for each different shift and investigations. And again, it's going to allow us to enhance what we share publicly on our website, which is going to be in response to kind of those calls for greater transparency that we've been hearing here lately. It's going to have a true case management capability. Again, our current cases are kept in different files within our computer system. We can't link cases together. Photos, videos, and evidence are all held in different folders. We have a different software to track evidence right now because our current system doesn't have that capability. And again, that creates that liability issue for us that we're going to miss something when it comes time to turn anything over for discovery. And we wouldn't want that to happen during a trial and they find out that we withheld something accidentally and we convict somebody and then they get a new trial. That can be very expensive for everybody. Currently, we also have no auditing function within our records management system. And when I talk about an auditing function, I talked specifically to Tyler about this, is when we pull up a case, I want to be able to see on a list what documents are in that case. And if we've got, say, a sexual assault case where there's supposed to be 4 particular types of reports filed, the supervisor can open that case file up and see, hey, here's these 4 things without having to click through 25 different pieces of paper in that file to open it. It'll help with our auditing of our evidence, which is a big risk factor for us. They've got a built-in feature that's going to help us in that area as well. And it's going to link these cases together so that if we're looking at Tom Johnson, when we click on Tom Johnson, it's going to show us every Tom Johnson that we've dealt with. It's going to speed up the way the officers write reports. So when they're in their squad cars, as they start typing a name in, it's going to recognize that and it's going to pop up on the screen with like a date of birth and it will say, is this the Tom Johnson you're talking about? When they click yes, it's going to autofill a bunch of the lines as far as date of birth, when's the last time they were arrested, their home address, things like that, which will speed things up. It'll do the same thing for dispatchers. So when they're dispatching a call, if it goes to a particular address, say it goes to Walmart and they tell us, hey, Tom Johnson's in aisle 3 and we think he's shoplifting. They can pull up Tom Johnson. They can see, hey, Tom Johnson's fought with officers the last 6 times we've dealt with them, so they can dispatch more cars. Currently, they can do that. It's just a lot of toggling between systems. And sometimes our comm center operators are in there by themselves on the night shift. And that's a lot to do when they've got phone calls coming in and they're dispatching police, fire, and ambulance out of the comm center. Let's see, we can track our data on traffic stops. Again, I've talked about this before. Currently, we just don't have that capability. We'll be able to track the race, sex, whatever you need to track on traffic stops, whether we issue a ticket or a warning, irregardless. I talked about the report writing. And again, I talked about partnering with Hiawatha. It's going to give us access to greater data and more data. Zach, you want to come up and talk about the dollars?
Afternoon. You may have noticed the figure in there, the first one, the 300,000. It looks pretty similar because we have this included in the FY22 budget. So when the budget was put together, this was one of the major initiatives that was presented before City Council and is previously mentioned by Chief Kitzmiller. Being that it impacts public safety and is aligned with the strategic plan initiative, this is one of the major changes we're looking at over the next couple of years. But I shouldn't just say for police, it's actually police, fire, and also emergency 911, being it's an integrated system. Looking at the cost more fully, there will be another $75,000 in an expected cost for hosting. Tyler offers an option themselves, but this is actually a cheaper option where we would send the data over to our Involta center that the IT department currently manage our hosted information from. So there'd be some management of it. It'd be much less expensive than us outsourcing that to Tyler. So that add another 75,000 onto it. And then also with Hiawatha's cost share, which hitting another strategic plan goal, generate additional new revenue through alternative resources, 2.1, $40,000 in the implementation for year 1. Steve, we got to hit it when we can. That brings it to 335,000 for the first year. So unfortunately, it is a little bit above what we currently have budgeted, but it's pretty close, especially for a system this magnitude. So we're really happy to find out that these final costs that we're looking at, because these are very close to what we would expect to see in a contract coming before City Council next month. We'd be able to support those costs in this next year's budget. And then where that would move going forward is the other 381,000. That's made up of, it's primarily 2 implementation costs of per year of 300,000 and 300,000, so about 600,000 implementation. The front end costs for these systems are pretty weighty because you're paying for the project management of the system coming into place, as well as the setup of the system and configuration. On the ongoing maintenance side of it is 81,000. That's where you'll see that plugged into the out years. Fortunately, we were able to also negotiate for the first 5 years that maintenance cost would be fixed. They don't typically do this, but we're able to get that worked into a prospective contract right now. Similar to hosting services, we expect there might be a 3% increase. And then Hiawatha currently would be contributing $8,000 to the system. One of the other benefits we do have going with Tyler and the setup we have, if we were to bring in Mount Vernon, they're also written into the contract where we could provide the same service setup as Hiawatha with no additional cost to us. So that would be additional revenue if they were interested to come on. And one of the things I should mention in there, the reason why the cost share is lower than potentially it could be is they wouldn't be utilizing the entire system. They would primarily start with the records management component. But it would give us the opportunity if they wanted to move up into some of the other modules over time, then we could talk about the cost sharing agreement and how that worked forward. So in the out year, one of the things I look at is what does this cost on an ongoing basis? FY24, we really get out of the one-time cost and we start looking at what is it on an annual basis. So it's about $150,000. It is a much larger jump than what we're currently utilizing, but as the chief laid out previously, the reason why we're doing it is because of the level of service provision we'd be getting with this new system going forward. And for an ongoing budgetary standpoint, one of the areas where we'd be well placed is this year's budget. We have 150,000 added into the police department's budget to cover this. The other 150,000 is coming from one-time dollars. But what that means is in next year's budget, we already have a position in there for 150. So going forward, the operating costs wouldn't increase. It's just the one-time cost. So in the budgeting world, it means that we kind of have a placeholder in there for the next year, which is a good thing. So we don't have to add that to next year's budget. It's already in there. The 5-year cost of this is about 1.24 million. So once again, it is a significant investment, but being it's in public safety, mind you, is about 50% of our general fund revenue expenditures in the city, and the operational impacts and efficiencies it's bringing. We're excited to have this project before City Council.
Thank you, Zach. I'm sure there are questions. Randy.
I will start. Zach, do we have, you had mentioned, and the chief had also mentioned too, the efficiencies that can be brought forward with this. Do we have any correlation to what that might do to payroll? Is there any savings to the payroll side that would be leveraged on that?
If I can speak to one aspect of it, then I'll pass it over to the chief to speak more specifically. The reason why this is aligned with strategic plan 5.1 or goal 5.1 is the underlying question in 5.1 as we see it is how many police officers, firefighters, as well as E911 staff do we need in the city? And one of the things we found as we were trying to flesh that out of trying to find that right allotment is not having sufficient information as to level of service and how services are currently being deployed limits us in being able to make sure that we're utilizing our staffing as efficiently as possible and as effectively based upon the needs of the community. So we find our expectations is this system will help us right size the understanding of what level of service can we provide in the city and what efficiencies might we be losing out on right now by not having a system that aligns us more efficiently. So currently, we don't know if that's going to lead to savings over time of not having to increase staff as quickly or looking at things differently, but that's a question we expect the system to help us answer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Chief, you talked about Hiawatha being a partner. You did not mention Cedar Rapids. Can you tell us how going forward this system will help us in sharing information with Cedar Rapids? I see Cedar Rapids being a lot more critical than I do Hiawatha because, you know, too many times I'll hear that somebody got ran out of Cedar Rapids and so they just come over into Marion, situations like that. So maybe you can educate us about how you share information or how you can get information and coordinate information with Cedar Rapids today and how the system is going to help you doing that in the future.
Now it's done through emails. It's that primitive. Cedar Rapids and Lynn County are on the same system. They're at the end of life on their systems. They've also got built in the jail system down there. So a lot of that stuff, we can't get access to jail records, booking photos and things like that is not something that we can do automatically. Tyler is linked up. They've got an interface in there that they have told us that wherever Cedar Rapids goes to, they'll be able to work in that interface piece. And even down to the jail booking photos. So I think it'll streamline that process quite a bit from what we're doing now. Like I say, the system that we have now is rudimentary, I think is the best word I can use for it. And it's basically down to us having to pull data out, stick it into an email and send it down to Cedar Rapids.
So we've got an antiquated system that needs fixed in the future on how we share this what I think is far more critical information dealing with Cedar Rapids.
Yep.
And what's happening over there in coordinating things than, I mean, everything you described, I think is positive and I think it's good. But kind of disappointed that we're still not able to share information with Cedar Rapids. Hopefully that will get mended in the future.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, I think it'll make it more efficient. Now, we are swapping information. I mean, we do that regularly. We get daily call logs and things like that, and then there's individual instances where we get them. But I do think it'll make it easier. As far as the efficiencies go, again, coming back to what we share, even with like the FBI, with the NIBRs, at the end of the year, we have to provide data to the federal government on violent crimes. That's a chore for our records clerk to have to go through them, pull that information out rather than just having been able to simply click a button and have it populate and hit send. So I do think eventually we're going to see some savings on personnel. It's just hard to say at this point how much that's going to be. It's certainly not going to cause us to add any bodies to the department to take care of this. We will have one senior lieutenant that's going to be sort of our project manager for this. He's already assigned to the day shift. So he'll take over, kind of taking lead on this along with Ann Kroll within our department.
Yeah, I think it's very good for Marion. I mean, this is a giant step forward in our technology. So I mean, I support it 100%, but I do look forward to the day that we will have a robust enough system throughout the entire county where the information can be shared or grabbed as seamlessly as you're going to be able to do just for our city.
We explored that option and got some pushback from Cedar Rapids, not the PD. It was not the police department, but basically that we were going to slow them down and muddle up what they were doing. And then, you know, we're at this point and they're still writing their RFQ. So
when we have this system, we won't be able to link up with them because they won't have the right.
we'll have an interface to do it. It won't be direct. There'll be an interface that we can share information. They do a lot of stuff with like Lynn County. When Lynn County wants a case record, we'll have a cloud service that we can put it on a cloud instead of putting things on a thumb drive to send it down to the prosecutors. We can send it to the cloud and then they can, we'll give them a one-time access or say, hey, you're limited to a 10-day window to go in and pull this stuff off. It'll save us a lot of time that way.
Okay, well, I mean, it's certainly going to make our public safety personnel's lives easier, and it's going to make it better, easier for them to do their job and to do it better.
Yep.
Okay. And Chief, go ahead. And then we'll go to Will and then back to Randy.
If I may, just to give a little history, over the past 30 years since I've been here, we have never been able to interface with Cedar Rapids or Lynn County Dispatch. We are the only fire department in the county that actually has two dispatch centers. We are dispatched by Lynn County and we are dispatched by Marion, our own emergency communications center. So we have never seen an interface with the rest of the county. This is going to be is going to help out so much. Right now, everything we do at fire is manual into an Excel spreadsheet. And when we have to look up data for our state reports, our federal reports for NFPA, all of those things, it's pretty much manual going through paper. We have looked forward to this happening for years. I think it was 10 years ago, we really wanted to switch out what our program was then for our statistics so that we could become accredited. If you remember back in 2014, we were trying to become accredited. We could not because of our data. And I think this will make a big change and will help us to better prepare the fire department as well as the police department on future staffing, even on future apparatus purchasing. Do we need the apparatus that we're getting? These kind of numbers will actually help with that. There's programs that other fire departments in the country are using with this program, and I really encourage you to support the program. I think it's going to be very helpful for all of us.
Thank you. Okay, Will, and then Randy. Anyone else?
Can you go back to the dollars and cents slide? Maybe I missed it, but the 300,000 in FY22 and then 381 in FY23. Why the the cost? Why the 381 in the second year when it's budgeted at the 300?
Great question. The 81,000 would be due on the 19th month, so about halfway in between. Instead of being at the very beginning of 24, it's actually due at the beginning of 23. So that's why it's included in there. So at the end of our implementation timeline that's being projected at 18 months, that's when it would kick in for the full maintenance for the first year. So we pay in
actual
advance.
Cost is 600, not 300.
Maintenance is about 600,000. We'd be paying as well that first payment of the maintenance for the first year, we pay in advance. So correct, or the 81,000. So that the 300 segments, and I didn't break it up that way, but the 300,000 segments would be for implementation primarily. And then there's 81,000 that would be due at the halfway period, basically July or January 1st, which would be the maintenance fees for that first year.
It costs 600, not 300,000.
Correct, 600 is total.
Budgeted for 300,000.
Budgeted the first year for 300.
Okay, I guess I didn't see where it said it was 600. I always thought it was 300,000.
Correct. When we do our budget, since they're only annual budget appropriations, we put in there 300,000 allotment for 22. However, I think the initial estimate when we presented for city council at that time was 600,000. So I should mention, I mean, it is a little bit higher with hosting services. We wanted to bring that to city council's attention as well. It's just one of the costs for it's information heavy. So there are significant costs to make sure that there's
I guess
access.
that, I guess I didn't remember it was 600. I always thought it was 300 for some reason. Thank you.
Oh, you know.
I know.
Randy.
Chief, going back to that comment about the subscription of this, does this have the capability of linking to other subscriptions across the state? I mean, could you share data back and forth with Dubuque if Cedar Rapids got on it later in the future? Des Moines, Iowa City, does it
Terrell,
have that capability?
I'm going to ask Terrell because he may have a better view of that. I know we can locally.
They have the same system. If they happen to buy Tyler, then it would be very simple to do. But even if they don't buy that same system, just the fact that we're upgrading to something so modern, it's going to have modern exchange interfaces capabilities. So it sets us up to be able to do that. Even if there's some work to set up some kind of a transformation file, we could never do that right now. It'd be very manual to export and try to manipulate something. This, I don't know for sure, it depends on their system, but it's going to set us up to be more capable for that.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious because as our department continues to work these cases and they start to bleed over, so to speak, into other jurisdictions and territories, I was just curious if that information was shared, and that'd be critical obviously on the fire side as well too for some of their data, but that's what I was just kind of curious. So thank you for that.
And through this and I made a comment about Zach earlier. I was kidding about him coming up to give his presentation. Zach really jumped in. I know when I'm over my head and what my specialty is. And when we started talking dollars and cents, Zach jumped in, got him down about 100,000 on the upfront cost roughly by negotiating with him. He did a great job. Terrell has been invaluable as far as hosting and what's the best route for us to go as a city. What's the cheapest route? What's the most safe for us? Chief Crable, Amal, this was truly a team effort. We relied on the subject matter experts to kind of get us to this point. So I'm pretty happy with what we've done so far.
It's awesome that we're at a level where we have experts that can really do get the best result for the city. So thanks to everyone involved. Colette has a comment, question.
Randy teed me right up, so thanks, Randy. I just wanted to follow up on this whole idea of being able to interface with whatever the other systems are. This is super exciting, by the way. Good work. Too bad we didn't have some type of kickback, right? Like a 10% for that work that you did. Darn it. But maybe that's a new program. But my question is regarding this system that you've decided to onboard. When we look at its competitors, right, and the other systems that are available, is it sort of one of the systems that's kind of the go-to for this kind of work that you're doing, which would then hopefully help long-term with the interfacing with other, systems that folks might purchase?
Yeah, I think we use Sourcewell to find it.
Sourcewell is a procurement venture that they do an RFP on behalf of any entity in the country. And then they take responses and they awarded it to Tyler based on all their qualifications. Tyler is also very huge in all the government sector softwares. And when we looked at this particular product, we were looking to see, is this something that they're putting an RD into? Is it towards end of life? And we really felt confident about what they've done with it so far to build it out. It doesn't feel like an immature product. It feels like it's at that level that's been developed, that we're not going to walk in and then debug it for them.
So hopefully hearing that, right, as Cedar Rapids has to figure out maybe what their next system will be, as you said, their end of life. I
Yep.
mean, if Tyler's one of those sort of top-notch systems, perhaps that's what they end up selecting, and then there's no interface, right?
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Start working your magic.
It's interesting, the number of agencies that we've talked to that were switching out, looking for new systems, and almost all of them, I think probably all of them that I talked to, it was due to end of life of their current system, where the company just says, look, we're not providing updates, when we're not providing fixes, you're on your own. So that's why I feel comfortable with Tyler, because they are such a big company that will get that support for several years, rather than, roll the dice and 3 years later, I'm right back in here again.
Right. That's great. Exciting.
Do you want to talk about
Transparency?
the equity aspects of it?
Yeah, I think from the transparency piece, we talked a little bit about that. With the concerns about racial profiling and things with the traffic stops, that's data that we just can't collect now, that we're going to be able to do. We're going to be able to show our data and be more transparent with people and the public proactively. Again, we can give kind of rudimentary stuff now, but they've got pretty much a dashboard that you can put on a public facing website that'll allow the public to go in there and manipulate that data and play with it to get that information that they're looking for.
That's really great. So you expect this will be in final form in front of the council next month, you said, in August?
That's currently what we're working with Tyler. They've given us a draft contract, and that's why we wanted to give you an update on these figures, because this would be the financial package in there. You'd be able to see a full contract as well with the other stipulations in the contract moving forward. But if that were to go forward, implementation would start as early as October. And once again, with a conservative estimate on the timeline, that could be an 18-month implementation. So it does take a while implementation, about a year to a year and a half, with hopefully it fully operational in 2023.
But in the meantime, I mean, it's not usable at all, or are pieces usable while it's being implemented?
For what Tyler mentioned, implementation can take about a year, give or take, but usually until you get to the year point, certain components of it wouldn't be ready. A system of this nature does take a while, because it's not just overlaying the hardware infrastructure. You're actually looking at your processes, remapping them, redesigning them, and making sure the software is in alignment also with the service delivery side of it. So it is a significant, it's almost like an ERP for public safety that would be implemented. So it does take a year plus to have it fully operational.
Plus training?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Randy.
Thank you. We don't anticipate any new hardware unforeseen in the future that's going to need to be purchased that would be outside of this package, do we? Anything in patrol cars, fire stations, fire trucks, anything that would potentially be needing additional funding for in the future to support this?
The specifications for the desktop computers, we only have a handful that are not at that spec, but we're replacing them during our asset replacement right now. So by the time we get the software implemented, they'd be up to speed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and just for a preview in FY, because Tara and I were talking about it recently. In FY22, we currently have budgeted, or FY23, we have budgeted asset replacement for all the computers for police, and asset replacement. Once again, it's kind of a rolling stock of inventory. We don't always replace in that schedule, but we do have the expectation that would be in 23. So it aligns really well with the hardware side of it. And then on the software side, Tyler also has this evergreen proposal in which, when they make changes to their software side, they don't pass those one-time costs on. It's more of on an annual basis.
So also just to confirm what I believe is correct, that then what you just talked about with a 1-year implementation, that the beginning of the database, building up the database will be a year from now, because you're not going to be able to go back and include any past information, since that's all manual. So the building up of the database and being able to search for things is a year away. Is
Yes.
that correct?
You've got the option of importing data. We chose not to. Everybody that we've spoken to that's changed systems has said, don't do it because if your data is not precise, you're just
Right.
clogging up a new system. They maintain it separately on a server. Most people, I think Dallas County said that they basically relied on that backup or the old data for roughly 2 to 3 years before
Okay.
they quit using it. I know when the FBI, when we did it, it was the same process. And after about 3 years, you kind of knew that that stuff was there if you really wanted to get down in the weeds, but most everything you needed was on the new system. And it's cheaper that way. I think it saved us.
50,000 plus.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you. All right, the remaining items on the agenda are 2 discussions that will be for Thursday. And that brings us to the motion regarding closed session.
Your Honor, I move to adjourn to closed session regarding land acquisition as permitted under section 21.51J of the Code of Iowa, and this will be regarding 2 separate matters.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding land acquisition as permitted under section 21.51J of the Code of Iowa. We will have the attorney's statement.
Your Honor, I've reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Section 21.51J.
Thank you. Any discussion before we have a vote? Do the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mayor Abu Osley,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Cadelia,
Yes.
Mr. Sternef.
Yes.
Okay, we're adjourned to closed session. Thank you.
Are we staying in here? Oh, that's a good question.
We go